For that age and for Spanish players, it's not a very typical thing to hear.
Ferrero finally reveals it. And honestly, it changes everything you thought you knew. 75 days, 5 tournaments, 2 Grand Slams, Sinner collecting everything that was supposed to belong to Alcaraz. Every single expert predicted this wrist would take weeks. The doctors said minor, the analysts said manageable. The whole tennis world nodded along. Every single one of them got destroyed by the reality. But here's what nobody is saying out loud. Spain's Davis Cup captain David Ferrer, the man Alcaraz texts at 6 a.m., went on record. He finally broke the silence nobody wanted to break. And what he reveals is not about tendons, it's not about timelines. It's about a decision Alcaraz made inside his own head. A condition so extreme that it is physically impossible to rush. One non-negotiable demand, 0 risk of re-injury, not reduced risk, not managed risk, 0. That single decision is why Alcaraz's wrist is taking longer than any prediction dared to imagine. The injury was never the real problem. Alcaraz's mind was. Subscribe right now. Because what Ferrero finally reveals next goes even deeper than that. David Ferrer is not a man who talks for the sake of talking. He never was. During his playing career, he was known as the worker, the grinder, the guy who said less and did more than almost anyone on tour. So when David Ferrer steps in front of a microphone and starts talking about Carlos Alcaraz's wrist in detail, you listen. Because he does not do it unless something needs to be said. And what needed to be said had been building for weeks. Since April 14th, the tennis world had been running on rumors, half-updates, and Instagram videos trying to decode whether Alcaraz's wristband was looser than the week before. Journalists were counting pixels. Fans were reading body language from beach holiday photos. The actual medical truth? Buried, controlled, protected. That is exactly what Ferrer cracked open. He told RNE, Spain's national radio, something that sounds simple on the surface but carries enormous weight underneath. He said the recovery is going well, but then he added the line that reframes this entire situation. He said, "The timelines must be respected," and then the real one, Alcaraz will not return to competition until he has full guarantees that he will not get injured again. Not better guarantees, not reasonable guarantees, full guarantees. Stop and sit with that for a second. Because every expert who predicted a 2-week recovery, every analyst who penciled Alcaraz into the Roland Garros draw, every pundit who said this was a minor tendon issue, they were all calculating based on standard medical timelines for tendinosynovitis. Inflammation of the tendon sheath. Ice it, splint it, rest it. 4 to 6 weeks, maybe 8 in a difficult case. That was the consensus. But nobody accounted for Alcaraz's personal condition. This is a 23-year-old who has already won 7 Grand Slam titles, who became the youngest man in history to complete the career Grand Slam when he lifted the Australian Open trophy on February 1st this year, at 22 years and 272 days old. Who has a career in front of him that, if he stays healthy, could rewrite every record in the sport. He knows this, his team knows this, and so the calculation changed completely the moment the second MRI came back showing significant inflammation, worse than anyone expected on day 1. Alcaraz stood at a fork. Rush back, defend his titles, protect his ranking points. Or stop completely, trust the process. Refuse to return until the wrist is not 90%, not 95%, but truly, medically, undeniably ready. He chose the second road, and that choice is costing him everything in the short term. Madrid disappeared, then Rome, then Roland Garros, where he was the 2-time defending champion, then the entire grass season. Queen's Club gone, Wimbledon gone. That is back-to-back Grand Slams missed for the first time since 2020, when COVID canceled the world. Sinner took the top ranking. Sinner is now at Wimbledon, and Alcaraz is in Murcia, somewhere between a physio table and a running track, waiting for a wrist to tell him it is ready. Over 3,300 ranking points evaporated, just gone. And Ferrer's revelation explains exactly why that was always going to happen the moment Alcaraz set his condition. Because the nature of tendinosynovitis, the specific biology of this injury, means that you cannot truly test a tennis player's wrist until they Actually start hitting at full load. You can do all the MRIs in the world, you can monitor inflammation markers, you can do controlled movement drills and light hitting sessions, but the wrist does not reveal its true condition until a forehand at full topspin, at full pace, in full match intensity, puts real load through that tendon sheath. And Alcaraz said he would not do that until the risk of that load causing re-injury was zero. That is not stubbornness, it is not fear. It is the most rational decision a generational athlete can make when they are 23 years old with potentially 15 more years of elite tennis in front of them. Garbiñe Muguruza said it plainly when she spoke about this injury. She said the wrist has small bones. She said it needs to be handled very carefully. She said Alcaraz needs to control his anxiety about returning because players feel enormous pressure to come back before they are truly ready. That pressure is real. It comes from everywhere. Sinner is pulling away at the top of the rankings. Zverev won Roland Garros in Alcaraz's absence. The draw at Roland Garros, with both Sinner and Djokovic exiting early, was arguably the most open it had been in years. Alcaraz watched that from home. He was the two-time defending champion. He would almost certainly have won it. That is not a hot take. Zverev has lost 4 of his last 5 matches against Alcaraz, including the 2024 Paris final. The path was wide open and Alcaraz could not walk through it. That kind of pressure breaks lesser athletes. It reshapes their decision-making. It pushes them back onto the court before their body is ready because their mind cannot handle watching someone else collect what was theirs. Alcaraz did not break. Ferrer told reporters on El Partidazo de Copa that he messaged Alcaraz one morning and was surprised to get an immediate reply at an unusually early hour. The reason? Alcaraz was already traveling to Barcelona to see Dr. Catoro, the specialist overseeing his recovery. Ferrer said Alcaraz told him he was eager to compete, that it was feeling long, and Ferrer called that a very good sign. Not the eagerness itself, but the fact that Alcaraz was channeling that competitive hunger correctly into recovery urgency, not into a premature return. That distinction matters enormously, because the history of tennis is littered with players who came back too soon from wrist injuries and never fully recovered. The wrist is the most dangerous injury a tennis player can sustain, not the knee, not the shoulder, the wrist. Because modern tennis is built on topspin, and topspin is generated through rapid wrist acceleration on contact. Alcaraz's game, specifically, is among the most wrist-intensive on the entire tour. His forehand generates extraordinary racket head speed. His ability to redirect the ball mid-rally, to change pace and spin in a split second, all of it runs through that right wrist. A tendon rupture on a premature return would not be a setback. It would be a different conversation entirely. So the timeline that every expert predicted was not wrong because they misread the injury. It was wrong because they did not know the standard Alcaraz was holding himself to. No public figure announced that standard. No press release was issued. Ferrer revealed it quietly in a radio interview, almost as a footnote. But that footnote is the entire explanation for why July became the new optimistic target and why even July was being treated with extreme caution by everyone inside the camp. The original medical plan, as reported by Jose Moron of Punto de Break, was to begin light right-hand hitting in early July and increase intensity from there. Alcaraz was slightly ahead of that schedule when he posted the June 28th Instagram video, the first footage of him striking a ball with his right hand since Barcelona. Gentle forehands, controlled movement, nothing explosive, nothing approaching match pace, but it was something. After 75 days, it was a significant something. The reaction from fans around the world was immediate. One comment under the video read, "My emotional stability depends on that wrist." It was meant as humor, but it captured something genuine about what Alcaraz's absence has done to the broader tennis landscape. This was supposed to be the year of the rivalry. Alcaraz versus Sinner, match after match, Grand Slam after Grand Slam, the two best players in the world colliding in the sport's biggest moments. Instead, Sinner has had an open road at the majors, and the rivalry that tennis has been waiting years to fully arrive, it has been frozen. Mark Pecci, the former player turned respected analyst, made an interesting point about this period. He suggested that the forced time away from the sport might actually rekindle something in Alcaraz. that a player who does not always approach tennis the way conventional wisdom says he should, who lives by his own rhythm, his own schedule, his own version of what dedication looks like, might come back from this break with a hunger that is sharper and more focused than anything he has shown before. Pecci said he expected Alcaraz to come in fresher than ever. There is a credible argument for that. Alcaraz has played at an extraordinary intensity since bursting onto the scene. He won the US Open in 2022 at 19 years old. He has barely stopped since. The human body and mind need rest, not the enforced rest of injury that carries its own psychological weight, but the competitive reset that comes from absence, from watching, from wanting. Ferrer touched on this too. He noted that Alcaraz is so competitive that he cannot even play golf right now because the wrist prevents it. And golf for Alcaraz is not a casual hobby. It is a genuine passion. The fact that this injury has taken even that away from him speaks to how seriously the team is treating every single movement of that right hand. Nothing is casual, nothing is informal. If it loads the wrist, it stops. That level of discipline from a 23-year-old, one who by his own admission in a Vanity Fair interview acknowledged that he has not always been perfect about stopping when he should, suggests something has shifted in his approach. The maturity of this decision, the willingness to absorb the short-term damage to protect the long-term career, is not something that comes naturally to elite athletes at that age. It has to be learned, or it has to be forced by a moment serious enough to demand it. Barcelona was that moment. When Alcaraz felt his wrist give out on a return against Virtanen, something beyond the physical happened. He has played through discomfort before. He has won matches when his body was telling him to stop. But the second MRI, the one that came back showing inflammation significantly worse than the first scan, changed the conversation. That scan did not just show an injured wrist, it showed what an injured wrist could become if mishandled. Ferrer confirmed this indirectly when he said the timelines must be respected. That phrasing, must be respected, is not casual, it is deliberate. It signals that the danger of cutting this short is understood by everyone involved. The plan now is focused entirely on the North American hard-court swing. The Canadian Open in Montreal begins on August 2nd. Cincinnati follows in the middle of August. The US Open starts at the end of the month, where Alcaraz is the defending champion and where the ranking points he needs to defend are enormous. The target is to play enough matches in Canada and Cincinnati, somewhere between 8 and 12 competitive matches, to build the physical sharpness and match intensity that cannot be replicated in training before arriving at Flushing Meadows. That is an aggressive timeline given where he is right now. But the June 28th video suggests it is not impossible. What Ferrer's revelation ultimately does is close a gap that has frustrated tennis fans for weeks. The gap between what the medical community said this injury should require and what has actually happened. Doctors said weeks, reality delivered months, and the space between those two things felt unexplained, felt like something was being hidden, felt like the updates were deliberately vague to protect something nobody wanted to say publicly. What was being protected was not a secret about the severity of the injury. It was a decision made by Alcaraz himself about how he intended to handle it. A decision rooted not in fear, not in overcaution, but in a clear-eyed understanding of what is at stake. He is 23 years old. He has already completed the career Grand Slam. He has already won titles on every surface. He has decades ahead of him. A wrist that ruptures because he rushed back for one more clay court tournament. That changes everything. That is the calculation he made, and nobody around him was going to override it. Ferrer called the process good. Ferrer called Alcaraz's attitude very good. The same man who spent his own career demonstrating what it looks like to respect a process and trust the work. He looked at what Alcaraz is doing and called it right. That is not nothing. That is one of the most credible validators in Spanish tennis history, saying this situation is being handled correctly. The tennis world wants Alcaraz back. Sinner himself said at Roland Garros that tennis needs Carlos, that it is a better sport when he is around. Even the man who benefits most from the absence admitted that the rivalry is what makes the sport worth watching right now. That is how significant this absence has been, not just for Alcaraz's ranking, not just for his point totals. for the entire energy of the men's game. The US Open is 8 weeks away. The wrist responded on June 28th. The team is targeting August. Ferrer says the process is on track. Dr. Cotoro is satisfied with what he is seeing. The plan is intact. But here's the thing about Alcaraz's non-negotiable condition. The thing Ferrer revealed that changes how you read every single update between now and that first match back. Zero risk does not mean zero discomfort. It does not mean the wrist feels like it never happened. It means the medical team is satisfied that competing at full intensity will not cause structural damage. That moment, when the doctors sign off on that specific standard, is the moment Alcaraz steps back on a tour court. Not a day before. Every expert predicted this would already be over. They were predicting against a standard they did not know existed. Now you know it exists. Now the timeline makes complete sense. And now, when the next update comes, when the next video drops, when the next Ferrer interview surfaces, when the next journalist gets a message from inside the camp, you will know exactly what question to ask. Is the wrist at zero risk? When that answer is yes, everything comes back. The rivalry restarts. The draw at every remaining major gets dramatically harder. Sinner's open road closes, and the sport that has been running at about 70% of its full voltage snaps back to full power. That is what is coming. Ferrer finally told you why it has taken this long to get there. If you are not subscribed yet, hit that button right now, because when Alcaraz comes back, this channel will be the first place covering every angle of what happens next. And you do not want to miss the moment this rivalry reignites. The story is not over, it is just getting started.